How about now? Okay, there we go. Can you guys hear me? Going once. Laura said, "Yay!" Yeah. Sorry about that. Apparently, my headphones are not active for some reason. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to test this out a little bit here, and then we'll get started. Audio. Testing. Check. Check. There we go. All right. Now you guys can hear me, and you can probably hear me even better through the headphones. Yeah. Everybody good? Draw me a smile or a yes or a happy face if it's better. Okay. Good. All right. So what I was saying, we're going to dive back into boundaries today. Just to kind of go back over that, I think there's a lot of value left on that vine. So we're going to try and go through that one more time, and then we're going to be diving into the course curriculum kind of more deeply as the day goes by. So first, we're going to dive into boundaries. Then we're going to jump into increasing our self-confidence. We're going to talk about strengthening our assertiveness. And then there will be an assessment in that that you'll take. Pretty cool stuff. If you want to get into the assessments and you want to get into the kind of the homework and you want to see all the written work, you have to be signed up at rebel.thepeopledispleaser.com. Then we'll be working on taking control, which is a segment around how do you start to implement this stuff into your life. Then we'll conclude. So that's what's on deck for the day. Mental note, I know that I have this scheduled until 3 o'clock my time, which is roughly 5 hours from now. I am not prepared to talk that long. So I put it in there for that. So we, kind of have plenty of time to work. But at the same time, I do want to answer some questions. So I'm going to be pausing in between each section. If you have questions as I'm going along, please either write them down somewhere or just kind of keep track of them. And then I will do Q&As kind of throughout, and answer a few questions here and there as I'm able to. So I'll let everybody kind of get settled in, and then we'll get started. So thank you for all being here. I'm pretty excited about this. Looks like we've got quite a few folks here in the Rebellion system. We've got a few on Facebook, and I think we're going to have a really good day. So pretty exciting stuff. Before I get started, are there any questions from yesterday? No? Nothing? Not even one? You guys are all really smart? Is that the deal? I'll wait. Waiting just a few more minutes to see what we can figure out. So is it possible to eliminate? There's a great question. That's a really funny question. Let's see. Let me add this one. So great question. So is it possible to eliminate people pleasing when being a freelancer? Yes. Part of that is, well, I mean, it's really challenging because if you're a freelancer or an entrepreneur, you're kind of, especially in the beginning, you're really adverse to turning away clients, and you're kind of always operating in a mindset of scarcity very often. So knowing that you're kind of doing that work makes it a little challenging. So I would say that is it possible to eliminate it? The answer would be yes. Um, will it always be kind of a part of doing business? Probably in some regard. For me, less so now. I've been an entrepreneur now for going on 12 years, and I've owned a couple of different companies, and I've been very good at that. And I think some of the lessons I've learned through entrepreneurship are, kind of the idea that you can't please everyone, and if you try to, you end up losing money. So just as a thought. Um, that's an interesting one too. So, if a lot of people are going to agree, a lot of people are going to disagree. I really love the thread for this. So, guys, if you want to comment, if you want to get involved in the chat and actually be able to converse back and forth with the people on the thread, please feel free to go to rebel.thepeopledispleaser.com, and you can sign up there. So, without further ado, let's see. Oh, there we go. I'm really glad I could help, Cindy. It was a great question you asked yesterday. So, one more time, guys, thanks for being a part of this. I'll be pausing more throughout the day. My voice is a little tired from yesterday, so making sure I'm engaging my own self-care. Self-care is, pretty important. So there you have it. All right. So let me pull that background down. So welcome back to Rebellion, How to Stop People Pleasing. This is my free course, day 2 on how to stop people pleasing and start to take control of your life. Today we're going to talk about healthy boundaries first. I went through these slides yesterday and I want to do it again, simply because I think there's a lot of value in it. And it's really the cornerstone of all personal growth. I really do think that, and I've believed that for a long time. I used to, and that comes from multiples of years of reading books and trying to grow personally and putting a lot of effort into things that may or may not have been useful. And I think the challenge in that, now looking back, is what did I really want to happen, and then how do I make better choices and really impact myself. And as I kind of started to extrapolate from all the work I'd done and all the books I'd read, it's like, well, the one thing I'd never done is really put me first and really prioritized what was important to me. The minute I started doing that, um, let's see, Sarah, the emails are a little delayed, but as I continued to do that, um, I started to think, well, if I've read all these books and nothing's changing, what's the problem? And then when I started to prioritize myself and started to understand like how the system worked and what was going on inside of me, then I was able to start really making changes and have an impact on my life. And that's how I went from living in my mother's basement and having freshly gotten out of rehab and kind of a former drunk into the guy you see talking to you now, and the guy that you see every day very often walking around now the streets of Denver making content, right? So the the journey of 1,000 miles, of course, begins with a single step, and that's where I started. Um, and I had spent years and years and years trying to grow, and finally I figured it out through boundaries, and through ending this kind of relationship of people pleasing. So all that said, that's why we're gonna start doing this. We're gonna start doing this thing again. So first and foremost, we need to understand boundaries, like anything else, are a skill set. Um, it's not something that you're inherently born with, but it is kind of a nurture situation where your parents are going to teach you those things, and if they don't teach you those things, then it's a skill set you have to develop later in your life. Um, so when you think of it like tying your shoes, or when you think of it like um, any other skill set that you've developed, whether it be martial arts or skateboarding or kickboxing, or pick a modality, you have to practice anything to get better at it, right? So the thing I would say is probably that sets my boundary work apart is recognition in the fact that this is not something that's going to happen overnight. It can take months, it can take years to really get good at this. And with the right people around you, it becomes much easier. But at the same time, you have to be cognizant of, and aware that like not everybody's for you. You have to really know how to communicate. So it's like it's a multiple layered, multiple step process in understanding how to have boundaries. And then, it's even another step into like how do you enforce your boundaries? And then it's another step into like how do you assert them? How do you become more comfortable? And all that just takes time, right? So the discomfort most people feel when they start, in the boundary world, is they'll tell me they feel guilty or they're afraid everybody's going to leave them, and really that's not it. Very often it's just discomfort, right? Because your boundaries are about, as you see here, understanding your personal limits, right? This is what most people feel boundaries are, and they're really not wrong, right? So when you start to identify these needs, you really have to understand that that's only part of the process. And I think a lot of people get stuck there. Um, So they kind of go into this idea of like, I have to identify all my personal and mental and physical and emotional needs, and that's what boundaries are. That's really not it. Um, the next step in that process, of course, is then learning to communicate to other people what those needs are. So it goes by the old adage that healthy people ask for what they want, and boundaries are kind of they're kind of the roadmap to doing that, right? And how you communicate your boundaries is really going to determine how effective they are, right? Being calm, assertive, you have to know what you want and need, and then you also really have to give yourself permission because you don't really have to get that from anyone else, and you don't need anyone else's buy-in either. Boundaries are about you, and that's all they're about. So active listening is also one of the I mentioned it here, and um, I think it's probably one of the more important things because you have to learn to be attentive to what other people are saying, rather than getting into a defensive posture. Um, because here's the thing: most people, whether you're willing to change, whether you're ready for change or not, they're not. Um, so if you make big changes and nobody else is ready for them, of course there's going to be some blowback and there's going to be some people that may not like it, or there's going to be some learning that has to happen. So you have to be very cognizant in your listening. You have to be very clear, in your communication, and then you also have to have practice some grace and empathy and resolve some of these conflicts. So we don't set boundaries with other people. People bump up against our boundaries and it creates conflict. We then have to decide how much force we're going to use to push back on that, and it's really not one size fits all. It's like, don't bring a knife to a gunfight, but also don't bring a Twinkie to a knife fight. So the point I make is that, so if somebody violates one of your boundaries, the pushback on that needs to be equal to the offense. It can't be like somebody said the wrong words, or somebody bumped up against, perhaps, one of your boundaries is around time, and they were late by 10 minutes and they didn't call. You don't go no contact with that person. Like, that's too much, right? So the the thing you have to start looking at is, how do I be congruent in the consequence of the offense, and it's something you practice over time. We talk more about that in my boundary boot camp as well. It's actually an entire section of my boundary boot camp, which, by the way, is enrolling now if you want to get involved in that. So the next step in the process here is self-awareness and self-reflection. um, uh, the world at large now seems to think that boundaries are kind of like, um, they're like a nuclear missile. Like, you fire them and that's it. And that's not how this works. Okay, you really have to understand, and engage in self-reflection to understand your personal needs and your values and your priorities, and those are all going to inform the creation of appropriate boundaries. But you also have to assess them from time to time. Your boundaries are going to be a reflection of you, and since who you are is not a fixed concept, that means your boundaries will also change over time. They're not set in stone. I often say they're more like a jello mold. They're there, they're wiggly. If you bump up against them, sometimes they get punctured and then you get upset. Um, but for the most part, they're not walls that people have to navigate. They're not something people have to climb. It's just, this is the way we communicate. Um, so keeping in mind that if you're not, at least once in a while, having a conversation with yourself about what is within my Bill of Rights, then you're kind of doomed to being stuck in the system, right? So one of the more important boundaries that you'll ever learn, which is centric to my course, is consistently saying yes to everything has likely turned into a plague in your life. Your default answer, and when I say default, you've said yes to every request for so long that your no has become meaningless, and your yes means even less, right? And by learning to say no, and getting comfortable by, so it's, I, I I hate that people say I'm uncomfortable with saying no because it's almost always inaccurate. What's actually true is that you have a problem not saying yes. And because you have a problem not saying yes, it's like the very act or the inaction of saying anything but yes, whether it's like, can I have a minute? Or I need to think about it, makes you feel uncomfortable. And So because yes has been your default for so long. So if you spend a lot of time on yes, you get really good at it. Again, you get good at anything you practice, including not practicing. You've not practiced boundaries for a really good time, for a long time, so you're really good at it. You've practiced saying yes for so long that you're really good at it. So no is going to feel counterintuitive, especially when you do a lot of it, right? But saying no to most things gives you time to focus on what matters to you. Um, you'd be surprised at how few people actually give a shit whether you say yes or not. And you also would be very surprised, I suspect, to learn that most people who ask you for stuff are perfectly capable of accomplishing it themselves. And by you constantly handling it, you're actually sabotaging their growth. This is very true in parents. When our kids ask us for stuff, um, my my kiddos, especially when they ask me for stuff, I ask them, have they tried to solve the problem themselves? Um, before I even lean into help, right? Because my boundaries are, if you can do it yourself, you probably need to do it, and it's not my job to step in and be, you know, the rescuer in every, medium to fair interaction. So, unless it's extreme, I don't need to be involved in the teenagers' decision making. So, which brings me to the ideas of both empathy and compassion. One of the challenges with people pleasing, and one of the challenges that I see a lot of is people kind of conflate the idea that either having boundaries or not being a people pleaser equals being a jerk, right? And they'll ask me very commonly, how do I find the balance? Well, you don't. You don't find a balance between two toxic axioms, right? So here's your kind of people pleaser, right? And then over here we have our asshole, right? If you can see let's see, I don't want to say if you can see my asshole, but you get the point. So we've got people pleasing, and then we have an asshole, right? This is the tipping point. Like this would be the tipping point between two toxic extremes. So I don't understand why we would want to do that. What we're actually trying to do is level up to integration. So you're trying to go upwards, right? And this is what boundaries do. So boundaries are not meant to kick people out of your life. A good boundary will level up the consciousness of everybody involved, right? So up here we have boundaries. So above this kind of integrated line, and by the way, this is Dr. Robert Glover's work that I'm quoting here. So above this integrated line, we have like boundaries, right? We have action over excuses. We have kindness, right? Rather than niceness. Down here, we're like nice, right? And what else? I can't spell today. There we go. That's great. Attaboy, Nick. So we've got nice, and then maybe we've got passive aggressive, right? Up here we have assertive, right? So the whole point of boundaries is to move us up a level rather than to put us in a situation where we're constantly trying to navigate what's what. So you can see that we don't need to find the balance between two toxic extremes. We need to find the balance between who we are and what we need. So, all that said, empathy and compassion. Remember, you're not going to make the world subscribe to your fire-branded rulebook of do's and don'ts. Like, so if your boundaries require somebody else to change, then you don't have a boundary. You have a rule or a suggestion, and nobody's required to do that, right? So if you were to hand me a book of rules and say, here's all the things you have to know about me to be to be in my friend group, I'd tell you I'd rather not, right? So practicing empathy and compassion lets others adjust to you and this new way of living, and it keeps the right people in your life, because again, remember, your boundaries are to help us level up. It's not about whether other people fall into line. It's about you taking on your own life and being more comfortable and happy. So one of the things we really have to focus on is flexibility as well. So if you look at my little slideshow here, being adaptable is really important because you are going to change over time. So you have to be flexible to keep from constantly trying to enforce boundaries that no longer serve you. People change a lot, and boundaries have to be pretty consistent across all levels. So, like whether if you have a boundary with your mom, it needs to be kind of the same with your brother or your dad, or because your boundaries are based on your value systems and how you show up in the world. That means that overall, you have to be willing to adapt, right? Um, and again, coming back to that conversational piece where we're talking about comfort, rather than being comfortable in every situation, we have to get to a place where we're okay with that discomfort. But that takes a little bit of resilience and it takes a lot of perseverance. Um, you have to be resilient enough to uphold your boundaries, even in the face of criticism, and then staying committed to yourself, and practicing your personal principles. You have to persevere through that, because if you don't, what'll end up happening is you'll fail at about month one. Probably 30 days into really trying to learn your boundaries and trying to figure out what you're about. And then somebody will bump up against it, and you'll get tired, you'll get bored, you get frustrated, and then you'll be on my channel telling me that everybody's a narcissist and boundaries don't fucking work, and that's just it's just nonsense. Um, I won't go too far into the narcissistic diatribe, but not everybody that disagrees with you or doesn't like your boundaries is a narcissist. So get ready for that, because not everybody's going to like it. Your mom's probably not a narcissist. They make up like 0.1% of the total world population. Like, it's amazing to me how many people know a narcissist in my life. So, do they go undiagnosed? Sure, but they still don't make up as much of the population as we think. So maybe it's not about narcissism in our world. Maybe it's about we keep allowing people to walk on us because they don't know better, right? So learning to negotiate is also kind of a big deal, in the boundary world, because your boundaries are not rules, right? And you may occasionally need to compromise, in some way or another. Perhaps somebody's going to be late. Like, the time boundaries are a really big one to me. That video gets me in trouble every time I do it. But you just have to remember that there's a difference between hard limits and boundaries, and we do discuss quite a lot of those, in the boundary boot camp as well. So boundaries do equal, prioritization and time management, right? So when you start to make commitments and prioritize activities that align with your personal goals, you're going to be much happier, and you're going to be able to do more things with your family. You're going to spend more time on things that you think are valuable, and then you'll be able to have those strategies moving forward, which kind of allows you to be more consistent, right? I mentioned this earlier, which boundaries are based on value systems require really strong consistency, because without that, you lack the confidence to stand up for what you believe in, right? And in the boundary world, you have to be willing to speak up no matter what and no matter when, if it's necessary, and remain true to how you hold yourself. So I get this question a lot where boundaries are concerned, is like, when do I have boundary conversations? Very often after the offense. And it doesn't have to be in the moment, right? You can simply walk away from some things. And it's not to avoid the conflict so much as it's to give yourself time to calm down, or to just buy yourself a second, right? If somebody says, "Hey, are you mad at me?" after something, like, they bump up against a boundary, you can simply just say, "Hey, give me a beat. Like, let me give me 10 seconds. Let me just process, and then I'll answer that," right? Um, it's more about creating a bit of distance between you and the initial offense. Um, so, having said that, there's a lot of strategies to how you set boundaries, and we talk a lot about that. But you have to remember that boundaries are guidelines for how you show up in the world. You don't have to have 10,000 conversations with everybody you know. You simply have to determine how you want to spend your energy, and then you want to stick with that. So that's really all a boundary is. And remember, we're going to talk about, how to build more self confidence next, which is why this is here. Your self confidence is not about how you carry yourself or what clothes you're in. It's not about the car you drive. It's not about how much money you make. It's defined by how much you trust in yourself. Will you show up and do the things you say you're going to do for you? Um, so, what kind of questions do you guys have? Oh, let me go one more slide. There are 7 types of boundaries, and this is a pretty important slide. So let me make it center to our universe here. I'll move me. Hang on. So there are 7 different types of boundaries. We have our physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, mental boundaries, material boundaries, time boundaries, these are my favorite ones, social boundaries, and sexual boundaries. So boundaries are not one size fits all, guys. There's a lot of them, and a lot of different ways to set them. So it's important that you understand that and are able to set them accordingly. So, all right, what kinds of questions do we have about boundaries? Let's see. Laura, people pleasers, narcissists are especially tricky because they do what they like, and in a way, why shouldn't they? Um, so this is interesting. A lot of my people pleasing crowd tends to get into the victimized mindset that everybody that takes advantage of them is a narcissist. Now, I'm not saying that Laura here hasn't had a narcissist in her life before. I'm sure she has. Um, but what I am asserting is that if you never ask for what you need and you overgive, that is not the fault of the people around you who are using that. People are 100% going to take what they can get. They're going to take what you give them. So if it pisses you off that people are in that vein and they're a narcissist and they're taking advantage of you, well, yeah, very often it's because you're overgiving and you're doing it from a place of having zero boundaries. So if you give without boundaries, then yeah, you're going to probably bump into more people that are going to take advantage of you. Who else has a question about boundaries? If you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, or if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can comment in the thread or in the post that this is on. If you're on LinkedIn, I can't see your comments. And if you're on Instagram, I'm going to be popping over there in just a second to see if there's any other questions. Let's see. Let's check our Instagram and see what's going on. Anybody have any questions? I don't see anybody. Let's see. A few people got kicked off. If you're on the Instagram live, guys, it'll kick you off after 60 minutes. You'll have to log back in if you want to watch it on the other side. You can do it on YouTube. Missy 320, can I elaborate on the 7 types of boundaries? I sure can. So let's go back to that. Let me open that back up. So the 7 types of boundaries. I see Missy had asked this on Instagram. Guys, I don't see a lot of the comments from Instagram. So please, if you want to chat with us, go to rebel.thepeopledispleaser.com and get involved there, or you can watch us on YouTube as well. That's a better place to ask questions. So physical boundaries. This is the definition of personal space, right? So this is don't touch me. It's I don't shake hands. It's I prefer not to hug. I don't like to be touched by strangers. Those are good, physical boundaries. Like they delineate what people can do to you essentially, or your physical person. Your emotional boundaries, very important. These define how you show up and how you tolerate other people working within your emotional frame. So boundaries very often really only define things in this context. So if you think of emotions, all of these have kind of one variant theme. So a boundary defines 4 things. Number one, a boundary is going to define. Hang on. A boundary is going to define number one, who gets access to you. Number two, when they get that access. Number 3, what do they get to do with the access, i.e., what do they get to do while they're there? And number 4, when do they have to leave? Right? These are really what the boundaries are with other people, right? Who gets access to you? When do they get access to you? What do they get to do while they're there? And then when do they have to leave? That's pretty much it, right? So going back to our original slide here, when you think of emotional boundaries, that's how that shows up. So mental boundaries are things around, for instance, in my case, intellectual property, taking credit for my own work, people stealing credit for my work. Those would be violation. That would be a violation of your mental boundaries. Material boundaries are interesting. So when you think about material boundaries, this is, this can be money, this can be your personal property, it can be, um, really anything that you own, your home. I see a great question here, Shelly. I will answer that in just a minute. Um, our time boundaries are, I'm very big on time boundaries. So I do a video about that, relatively often about how I don't tolerate very well people being late. So therefore, I have really strong time boundaries. So if somebody says they're going to be somewhere and they don't show up within 15 minutes of the time they say so, and they don't give me any heads up, then I will leave. If they give me a heads up and they show up 30 minutes late, I will still, because I don't, I value my time and I value their time. And if they can't perform in that way, then that's probably not a good person for me to hang out with. Social boundaries are like what kinds of engagements you want to be a part of, the places you want to go, and who you want to spend your time with. And then, of course, your sexual boundaries are your sexual boundaries. Probably pretty self-explanatory. No means no, consent, etc. So, moving on. Now, let me go back to this. Wait, he says, still trying to learn. All right. By the way, my handwriting is terrible. If anybody wants to volunteer to be my Vanna White someday, let me know. All right. So, Shelley, material boundaries with kids, how to set, especially teens. So, there's two things. I talked about this in a video the other day, where I said that we have to stop coddling our teenagers, especially our children. Um, you set them just like you set them with adults. Um, if you don't, number one, set make no excuses, right? If you don't want somebody to use your stuff, then the answer is no, right? Um, that's parenting 101, by the way. Is like, um, you have to you have to be kind of you have to be a bit of a hard ass. You can't just let them run roughshod because it's easier for you. So the boundary isn't with your kids in that regard; it's with you, which is regardless of my feeling uncomfortable, this is how a boundary sounds. Like regardless of my feeling uncomfortable, I'm going to stand my ground on this, right? When a child comes to you and they ask for something, you simply say, I am not prepared to do that with you right now, or I don't want to, or I'm not going to do that, or no, or the answer is no, or whatever. If they argue, say, frankly, I'm the adult. I am your parent. This is my personal property, and I choose not to let you use it. You don't have to make an excuse. Um, Another boundary question says, what about boundaries at work? Well, Andrea, that's a good question, but I don't know what you mean. What about them? Um, yes, you have to have boundaries at work. Um, it's I should probably do an entire section on boundaries at work in the boundary boot camp. Maybe I will. I might just add that section going forward. But remember, your boundaries are about how you show up in the world. They're not they're not required for everybody to like them. Having boundaries with your boss, for instance, like this is pretty easy if you look at so for instance, a good work boundary would be time. Okay. Um, there's another good question. Sorry, I got distracted. So um, if I worked for myself, but when I was in corporate America, if they asked me to work afterward, I would ask what they were prepared to pay me for that. And if they were not, I would say, unfortunately, I signed up for a role that ends at 5 p.m. And begins at 8 a.m. If you'd like me to stay after, then there's going to need to be a compensatory factor. Otherwise, I'll be headed home early, or I'll be headed home on time. Right? If another great example of this in today's work environment is where somebody be like, I need you to have your cell phone available so we can talk through the proposal this weekend. Unfortunately, um, in that case, I would say something like, well, I can appreciate that you want to work on weekends. I choose not to do that. That is time I set aside for my family, etc. Right. So how to set boundaries with so I hope that helps, Andrea. I hope that kind of answers your question. Mike, how to set boundaries with your partner if the needs of your partner is clashing with your boundary. I wonder what you're defining as a boundary. Um, you are not required to meet the needs of your partner. So that's an interesting one. I can't imagine a situation where the partner's needs would bump up against a boundary. unless it's like, I mean, if it's a sexual need, then maybe that could happen. If it, if it's an emotional boundary and their needs are bumping up against it, one or both of you is kind of maybe off track. So that's kind of interesting. Mike, if you could elaborate on that, I'd be curious um, as to what you mean. And you're in the StreamYard, so I can see your posts pretty easily. Um, so who else has a question on boundaries um, while Mike is elaborating? Anybody? YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We pop over to IG, see if we got any questions over here. I don't see it. Could you please elaborate on the 7 boundaries? That was Missy. Missy, I hope that helped. Um, gave you some more insight. And then don't look like we have any. We got a lot of thank yous on. Oh, Missy, you're so nice. Thank you for the thank yous. All right. And StreamYard. No, nothing from Mike. All right, cool. Well, that concludes our boundary section for the morning. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm running low on Pellegrino, and my voice is getting tired, so I'm going to take a quick break. Speaking of prioritizing myself. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Nope, that's Romana. Mark. Got a few more. All right, so I'm going to answer these, then I'll take a break. Sonia, if you're in an hourly role, if it's retail or if it's um, shift work or whatever it happens to be, the unfortunate news is um, that happens. Especially when you have a place that's potentially understaffed. If they're paying overtime, great, but you are still within your rights to say I'm unable to stay. And that's just the deal. So, will that get you fired? Maybe. Probably not, though, because if they're asking you to stay overtime, it means they have plenty of work for you to do. So you kind of have them over a bucket in that way. What I would say is, I'm not prepared to work overtime this evening. I need to prioritize my family, or I need to take some time off for myself, or whatever that is. And if they say, well, you need to stay or you're fired, then you have to make a decision. Sometimes boundaries do require you to make a decision. Sometimes it's not the right job. Sometimes it's not the right people. And there can be some variance to that, right? Romana, hello again. How would you language a boundary when somebody asks you a deep question and you don't want to explain? What a great question. Um, I don't want to tell you. I'm not going to answer that. There's a really simple, effective way to not answer questions. And it goes like this. That's a really great question, and I choose not to answer it. That's it. That's a really great question, and I choose not to answer it. Why? And then they'll say, "Well, why won't you answer it?" And the answer is because I don't want to. um, Learning to be socially honest was one of the funniest things I ever did, by the way. Um, so when somebody asks me, for instance, if I want to go to a party, and where I used to say things like, "Well, I'm really busy, and I got to meet my mom for dinner, and I got to wash my hair, or whatever." um, that's a really silly one. I got to wash my hair or whatever. Rather than that, I just say, "No, I'm not going to make it." And when they say why, I say because I don't want to. Um, and I think so many times we get in this headspace that we have to have like a really good excuse for why we're not doing what other people want us to do. And the answer is simple. I just don't want to. Um, so hope that helps, Ramona. Also good to see you. Um, so Mark S, is there a time and a way to express the repercussions of not respecting boundaries? Depends. Some boundaries need immediate enforcement, some don't. Very often they don't need immediate enforcement, or not necessarily enforcement, but maybe that's the word. It doesn't have to be concussive, I think is the point I'm trying to make. You don't have to make everything, kind of, fast and in the moment. So, for instance, if somebody brings up a subject that you have said multiple times that you choose not to talk about, this is very one of my important boundaries around the holidays is I don't discuss religion, politics, or money with my family. So if somebody brings up, you know, politics as an example, is there time to express the repercussions of not respecting a boundary? It's not about respect. It's, very often people are just having a conversation or whatever, but I will simply say, hey, this is not a conversation I choose to engage in, so I'm gonna make my exit, right? And what you see there is it's not me saying you can't talk about politics. It's saying I choose not to engage in that. That's the difference. So when you're trying to enforce law on other people, you say you can't do that. When somebody bumps up against a boundary, it's I won't do that. So I hope that helps, Mark. I hope this helps. All right. Mark and Mike. Mike, coming up, trying to find proper words to elaborate. All right. See, Laura, how do we set boundaries with people when we haven't set boundaries with them before? Same way you set them with everybody else. Um, and again, I, I struggle to see what you mean. Like I don't set boundaries with other people. I set boundaries internally, which is why my boundary boot camp is so important, right? By the way, if you want to sign up for boundary boot camp, it's on special for the next 2 days while we're doing this thing. Just go to myboundarybootcamp.com and I'll answer all your questions. In the meantime, it's also, going back to your question, how do you set boundaries with other people? Well, first, you stop thinking your boundaries are about other people. That's the first thing. If somebody bumps up against one of your boundaries, i.e., let's say your mom tells you that you're parenting poorly. Well, you don't have to deal with insult, right? What you can say is, Mom, I'm not open to receiving criticism on my parenting anymore. Well, I want to tell you how to do it. Okay. You're welcome to talk about how I do it, just not with me, right? So, Laura, the biggest change in the boundary boot camp that I see in people is that they start to realize that boundaries are not a conversation. They are delineators of how you show up in the world, what you will tolerate, what you will not tolerate, what you will accept, what you will not accept. Therefore, they define how you show up or how you don't show up. It has really nothing to do with other people, right? So, Joyce, I sometimes find it challenging to go from stating a boundary to having commitment to respect of the boundaries. Um, Again, I don't know how many boundary conversations you're having, um, but again, your boundaries should be about leveling up the consciousness of everyone around you, um, not necessarily making them adhere to the way you want them to show up. The boundaries have nothing to do with how other people act. They have everything to do with whether or not you will be in the environment when they're acting that way. So, um, so I get the question a lot. Like, how do I express when somebody bumped up against my boundaries? Well, the first step is just say, "Ouch!" Like, "Ow, that hurt." Um, the second step is, "Did you mean it?" The third step then is like if there's two things that can happen there, so they can either say, yes, I meant to hurt your feelings, which then you have to ask yourself, like, what did I do that made this person so fucking mad at me, that um, they needed to hurt my feelings, and then you have to work through that, and then you have to show them how to do this, right? Or if they're just passive aggressive, and they say, I really didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Just say, okay, you forgive that, and you move on. And then the third thing that can happen, which I think is where we start to see kind of manipulation in boundaries, is people say, well, you're being too sensitive, or and for guys they'll call us a pussy, or they'll call you a bitch, or whatever, and none of that's necessary. And frankly, if somebody deflects that way, then it's probably not a person you want in your life. Um, so, Andrea, my boss has been here we go. My boss has been working from home for almost 7 months now. I'm running his business and can only reach him by email. So what? Are you unhappy at work? If he doesn't want to run the business, then and you don't want to be there, like I think if he's not there, I guess I don't understand. Like if you're doing all of his work, if you're, I mean, that's part of the deal. If you're getting paid to be his assistant or work for him, then you kind of have to do what he wants you to do, within reason, of course. Mike, Well, we'll thank Romana for asking that question. That a girl. Get it done. Thanks for showing up, Mike. See, why does the response cause so much tension in me? Um, because you're not used to it. It's like anything else. You're going to respond to new stimuli in the same way that you respond to everything else. It's going to be uncomfortable. Um, you're not tense. You're uncomfortable. You're not anxious. You're uncomfortable. You're doing new shit. So, and whether it's skiing for the first time or surfing or whether you're learning how to paint or anything you try and learn, you're going to feel uncomfortable when you start. So you just get used to it, and that you'll get better and better and better over time. Do we need to give a reason for boundaries? No. No, you don't. um, Thank you, Laura. When I say I don't want to, um, well, tone comes with time. It's another thing you practice, right? Remember, guys, that I didn't have boundaries for a long time. I was probably the most ravenous people pleaser I'd ever known, up to and including when I'd met a few of my new clients. But realistically, you just have to work at it. Like it takes practice to communicate it. You have to learn how to do stuff, and that's part of the fun of life. It's part of the fun of living. So, Andrew, what if we end up more lonely as the people we are setting boundaries with walk out of our life? Um, if you set boundaries correctly, that won't happen as much. Um, and yes, you are going to be lonely. Setting boundaries for the first time in your life is going to make you lonely. But here's the deal: you're already lonely. And I know you're already lonely because you're on this call, right? Um, People pleasers are among the loneliest people in the world. We can feel like we are alone in a room of 1,000 people because we don't really know who we are. And boundaries are the way that you get to know who you are. Um, so are you going to be a little lonely at first? Yeah, probably. Will you make new friends? Probably also yes. Um, Andrea, yep, that makes sense. I'm I'm not seeing why this is a problem. This sounds like a great job. You go to work, you don't have anybody to answer to, and then you go home after 8 hours. Romana, you're very welcome. Mark, I'm glad I could help. And Andrea, you're crushing it, girl. Keep doing you. All right, guys. So I'm going to take a quick break. I will be back in 10 once you're done. No, we'll call it 5. Why don't we see? I'm gonna put up a little banner here. Back in. I'm going to do back at 11:05 Mountain Time. So I will be back shortly. We're going to do that. We're going to take this one down. So break time. Stand up, stretch your legs, wiggle a bit, and we'll be back shortly. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the show. Wow, I was a little tired today. Um, I hope you guys have enjoyed this morning session. Let's see. First, let's see. Laura Reed, what'd you say? Mm-hmm. Laura should be running this class. Let's see. Got a few. Any other questions? Um, Sarah, we talked about belief systems and fears quite a lot in my boundary boot camp. That might be a really good place for you to start. I don't have time to cover that in this one, um, but if you want to join that, just as a quick aside, too, guys, my boundary boot camp is one of the coolest things I've ever put together. It's something I'm really, really proud of, and it does come with access to the group or the community in that work. And I think something that is really important to realize, especially where boundary boot camp is concerned, is that people pleasers and people without boundaries weren't created in a vacuum, which means the community is actually really important. We change together faster than we change alone. And having people there that can hold you accountable and cheer you on and help you get really involved in that work is really vital to being happy. So, all that said, if you're interested in joining Boundary Boot Camp, now is a great time to get involved. It's really a wonderful program, and I will talk more about that at the very end. So, um, all right, moving on. So, Shelley, you are, let's see, I was recently brought to my attention that I have a questioning tone. So, this is interesting. I will definitely touch on this one. So as Laura said this to Shelley, it was recently brought to my attention that I have a questioning tone. So statement sounds like I'm looking for validation. Um, so all you have to really do is practice saying it in the mirror. No, 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 no. I don't want to. It takes time, and I think Shelley kind of touched on that. It's like you just have to practice, and you get good at anything you practice. So Um, yes, Shaw P. Boundary Bootcamp is an online course, but I teach it live. I teach it live about every quarter, and then there will be other ways to get involved with it later. But so I am teaching it live again here in December, kind of heading into January, and then we'll see how we do it from there. But we do have a community manager, or well, not really a manager, a volunteer that's really been helpful. His name is Mark, and we have really great people in the community, and that's only $37 a month. And Boundary Boot Camp right now is on sale at 197, which is an absolute steal. So hop in there, do the thing. You get 3 months of free um, group access. Shaw, a lot of people are in the UK during Boundary Boot Camp. I get that. We have quite a lot of people overseas. It is recorded as well, so you can watch the videos and play them back as you wish, and you can always be involved in the community. So, moving on. It's been an interesting day for me. So it's still an interesting day. I have a lot of things going on in my family life, which has been, more than slightly challenging. So, all that said, welcome back to Rebellion. This next couple of sections here are going to go kind of fast. It took about 45 minutes to go back over boundaries, but now we're going to pop into increasing self confidence. So the first thing we need to talk about is what is self confidence. I'm going to delete all this stuff off the board here so I can just get in there and do the thing when I'm ready to do it. But first we need to define what is self confidence. Probably, maybe it's best that we define what it isn't as well. But um, when we think of confidence, very often people think of like how you hold yourself or the way you show up or any other variety of modalities. But what it really boils down to is it's a feeling of trust in your own abilities, qualities, and judgment. So I liken this to saying it when somebody says they have confidence in a bridge, they know that the bridge is going to bridge for them, right? Like you can drive over it, it's not going to collapse. You are the same where your confidence is concerned, which means do you trust what you will do what you say you will do, right? If somebody else is confident in you, they trust that you will do what you say you will do. That's really all that boils down to is I have confidence in certain people and I have less confidence in others, right? Ultimately, you should have total confidence in yourself. However, You might not initially. So the first thing you have to do to start cultivating some confidence is build a list of proof um, and collected data of times when you proved you could trust you to do what you say you're going to do. So when I first, well, I guess the second time I got sober in my life, um, I was I was fundamentally broken. I haven't thought about this in a while. Forgive me. The first time it was hard too, um, but the second time was more challenging. Um, and I couldn't move really. I didn't want to get out of bed anymore, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to be on the planet. I wasn't strong enough to take my life, but I thought about it. And um, forgive me, I'm getting a little raw on you, but I tell you that because I was laying in bed one morning and I'd lost all my confidence. I'd lost everything. I'd lost my home. I'd lost my dog. Literally, I was a country song. A girlfriend had left me, and I was in pretty rough shape. And I was going through withdrawals, and I was hurting, and I couldn't muster the strength to get out of bed. So what I did first to start rebuilding my confidence was I said I was just gonna put my feet on the floor, and that was enough, right? Um, that was enough for a minute. Took a day, or every few hours, and just I'd I'd sit up and I'd put my feet on the floor, and then the next day it was like maybe I'll get up and I'll eat some Sour Patch Kids, right? Like I'll put my feet on the floor and I'll eat some Sour Patch Kids, and I did that, and then after that, it was like maybe I'll go get a glass of water, and then maybe I'll go and shower, and then slowly but surely over time, about a week, I was able to get in the shower, and then I'd make it to a meeting, or you know, maybe I'd go get myself some tacos, or whatever. And the the moral of that story is that every day I would also write down every time I did it. So every time I put my feet on the floor, every time I ate some Sour Patch Kids, every time I took a shower, I just write it down every day. This kind of list of this undeniable mountain of proof that I could get back to me, like I could get back to being who I said I was going to be. And that's what I mean when I say you have to collect data um, on being who you want to be. Some of you, watching this, may or may not um, be in a great headspace. And if you're not, the way to get out of it is confidence. And the way you build confidence is celebrating your wins and looking for proof that you are who you say you're going to be. So, just my thoughts on the subject. The second step in the process is you have to cultivate a list of areas or times when you betrayed your self confidence. It's really important too. This isn't about kicking your ass, though. Um, so let me go back to that idea. Like when I say cultivate a list of areas and times that you betrayed your self confidence, this isn't about kicking your own ass. It's about recognizing where you needed to make course corrections so you can be more of the person who you say you want to be. Very often when people come to me for one-on-one coaching, or when they get involved in my Boundary Boot Camp, or really any number of other things, that's one of the core tenets and problems that they have. And when you don't know who you are, um, it's hard to be confident, right? And when you look at how do I correct course against kind of old behavior, it's key, right? And it's how you change your life. So going back to kind of the definition of confidence, confidence equals trust. Do you trust that you will be who you say you're going to be? Um, and over a long enough timeline, the answer will be yes, especially if you're celebrating your wins and looking for undeniable proof, right? So no matter what goals you set, you break trust with yourself because you put your goals on the back burner, right? Since you're too busy to take care of you're too busy taking care of everyone else in your life instead of taking care of yourself, right? So this is where this list comes into play. Is like, what areas of your life do you know would improve if you started prioritizing yourself, right? And becoming less of a people pleaser again doesn't make you into a jerk. That's not what we're looking for, right? We're trying to find a way to level our lives up, not stay on the same plane of existence. So asshole and people pleaser exist on the same through line. To go from being a pleaser, you have to go to resistance, then you have to become self aware, then you have to integrate, you have to get some strength, and then you have to emerge. The process takes time, right? But every step of the way, your life is getting better. It gets harder at first every time you take a step, right? There's always kind of a little bit of a pain point, but it gets better along the way. And then the eventuality is you are going from, this is actually really important. I don't know if it's covered later in these slides. I don't think it is. So I'm going to do that now. So you need to understand the 4 levels of learning. I talk about this a lot in the Boundary Boot Camp, like a lot. So the 4 levels of learning look like this, right? Hopefully you guys can see this. So at this quadrant, we have unconscious, I don't know, conscious. I am unconsciously incompetent as to spell conscious. So, well, I guess I'm now consciously incompetent. So unconscious incompetence, we have conscious incompetence, we have conscious competence, and unconscious. It's spelled differently every fucking time. Competence. Okay. These are how every single person learns anything, right? So this is quadrant 1. You don't know what you don't know. Pretty easy, right? Quadrant 2. You do know what you don't know. Quadrant 3 is where you learn to do the thing that you don't know how to do. And quadrant 4 is where you have committed it to mastery. Where boundaries are concerned, you will constantly be bouncing between these for the rest of your life, right? You will never master having boundaries. Maybe when you're dead, because ultimately nobody has access to you at that point. But you will never master this. It's part of the journey, right? So in the beginning, to develop some self-confidence, you don't know what you don't know. You move into conscious incompetence where you say, okay, now I don't know, or now I know I don't know this. Do I want to even bother learning it? Romana, this is written in a lot of books, so it's a great question. This is also written in Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics, one of probably the cornerstone texts, one of them anyway, of all personal growth literature. So this is where this is defined, okay? When you think about when we're talking about self-confidence, right? Going back to our original point of the discussion, this is how you do this. This is how you make this integration as you go from people pleaser to resistant to self-aware to integration to strength to emergence. And then all of these levels take that time. So you're always kind of starting here when you do something new, and then you're always moving from one place to the other place to get this all taken care of and put you in the right frame of mind, right? So thing about this is you can do it by yourself. You don't need me to help you do this. Semicolon. However, it's a hell of a lot easier if you're walking the path with other people, whether it's me or whether it's another coach or whether it's our Boundary Bootcamp group. You're going to be a lot stronger, a lot faster if you take the time to develop your confidence appropriately through your trust, right? So as we think through that, Ramona says, yes, that's the one. What questions do you have about developing confidence? And, so now we're going to do, I can do so much with this. I can do a banner. I can do hang on. Let's do question and answer time, shall we? So now let's do a Q&A. about confidence. Doo-doo-doo. Who has questions on the material I just presented where confidence is concerned? It's cute that you think that. um, oh boy, yeah, you should have seen yesterday. I don't know if you were here yesterday, Laura, but holy crap, that first hour was a shit show. It wasn't, I was doing fine. It's just I couldn't get the technology to work, and man, it was. Oh, Val, everybody say hi to Val. Oh, that's right, Laura, you were in the studio. Um, Probably next time I'll have somebody. Have somebody help me do this, where you can actually control it back and forth from afar, or maybe even in the room. Set this up more like a podcast, I think. But I kind of like the way I like the way we're teaching it now. I really do. I think it's more fun this way, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. I'm going to pop over to Instagram, see if anybody has any questions. Um, I'm always curious about the people who seem blindly confident about everything. Part of me admires and wonders how if I can get there. But also, I think arrogance does take it too far. Yeah, you're kind of right about that. So there's a borderline, between arrogance um, and confidence, right? It's okay to be a little overconfident from time to time. Very often, you're gonna learn some lessons that way, that maybe you don't want to. Um, but alas, it happens. Being an entrepreneur is kind of an exercise in confidence, except for I would say that being an entrepreneur for me, I guess the best way to say it is you have to be a lot brave, maybe less confident, more brave, um, and you have to be kind of stupid. So that's the definition of solopreneurship anyway. And then you kind of get smarter over time. And I think you become an entrepreneur. Um, I may not be a great example because I don't care about my company size getting really big. I care more about helping people and doing what's right. So um, that's a great distinction, Mark. Thank you for that. Um, so arrogance knows everything. Confidence admits they don't know. I think that's true in many ways. Um, so Romano, let's see. I want to come to a place I don't really care about what others think. Is that possible, or will I still worry and do it anyway? Um, yes. The answer is yes to all of that. Um, I think the not caring what other people think isn't sustainable over time. Um, and so you have to kind of care in many regard, um, what other people think, and if you don't, then you kind of turn into a jerk. I still care very much about what other people think, and I'm the people displeaser for God's sake, right? Like that's my moniker. Um, so it's not about whether or not I care; it's about whether or not I base my decisions on how much I care, right? So, and I give some people more weight than others. So, so my business mentors um, are very bright guys, and if they say something and I don't particularly love it, that doesn't mean that I won't do it. Um, it just means that you know, I have to kind of reconcile that in my brain, and um, learning that it's okay to care what other people think. And sometimes it's a good thing. It's more about how you make your decisions. So I hope that sheds some light on that for you, Ramona. Um, let's see. Yep, feelings are not facts. You're not wrong about that. Um, Way too many people think that they are these days, but alas, they are not. I always find it interesting. Like 700 people signed up for this course, and 50 of you showed up, and I'm glad you all did. Um, but it was literally 700 people signed up for this thing for free. Makes me wonder. Yeah, it doesn't happen with Boundary Boot Camp. Oh yeah, it does. Sometimes people don't show up. Um, But no, I think the free ones are interesting. I think we'll do pretty well on this one, and hopefully, I hope for whatever, for whomever is watching, I hope it's helping, and you're getting some valuable insights. So, with that said, we need to increase our self compassion, right? Um, this is. Let me go back to where is my what you call it. So my brain just stopped working. Oh yeah, so there's an exercise for this. I forgot that I wrote that. So going back to where was I? All right. All right. The good news is I don't worry about being perfect, right? So first thing you want to learn is a little bit of self compassion, right? And I do say write a letter to yourself and describe the situation. Describe situations that cause you pain or stress. Address yourself with the same compassion and understanding you would give to anyone that you love, right? Whether it's a friend or family member. And then acknowledge your feelings and remind yourself that it's okay to make mistakes and experience difficulties. This is one of the things that's been really important for me. Um, that I do a lot of is journaling and writing. This one's been this actually started me out on my book writing many years ago. I used to write a lot of letters to myself. Um, Another way that you can start to develop some confidence is through positive self talk. I don't mean standing in the mirror and shouting about how great you are, right? Uh, I think it's just the delineation that if kicking your own ass was going to work, it would have worked already. So you have to reframe your experiences, and it's like it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone does, and then what can we learn from the experience and move on? I write down a win for myself every single day. I write myself, and I do it twice. So I do once at night, once in the morning, and then I write my goals, and then I do something like this almost every day because listen, there is data that suggests that positive self talk does work. Um, and it's not because you're manifesting and it's the secret. Your brain is going to do what you tell it you to do, like almost inevitably. Um, so the when you think of it that way, if you continually put into the system, this is what I expect of you. Deanna dishes. Can you share how to apologize with confidence? Yeah, just say you're sorry and mean it. I'll come back to that. So, see it. All right. So I'll answer this one in just a minute, but um, so remind me, Valerie, remind me to do that. You're in here somewhere. Um, so remember, confidence is not built through shouting affirmations at yourself in the mirror, but it certainly can be helpful, right? And the way that I do it is I write down my wins and I celebrate them, pretty consistently. So moving on, engage in self care activities. It's another really important factor. Um, If somebody asks me what's the first step to getting anything you want in your life, and I will tell you immediately that it's your physical fitness. Um, Taking time to care for your body is the most important thing you can do in all personal growth outside of boundaries. Um, because boundaries are what's going to give you the time to do that, right? But exercise, eat healthy foods, get plenty of sleep, spend time in nature, do something you enjoy, right? But your self care routine needs to show you that you value and care about yourself. And by incorporating those techniques into your daily routine, you build more compassionate relationship with yourself, and you have much higher levels of mental health and resilience. Zig Ziglar once told me on a phone call. If you don't know who Zig Ziglar is, Google him. But he once told me on a phone call that I had to build a better physical reserve. And he loved to work out. He was really good at it. So um, that said, um, it's a vital component to how you show up, and that's why I've got these guns, right? Because I like to be strong and I like to take good care of myself, right? So as we think about this, when we think about confidence, um, this was what came up for me and my friend Morgan as we put this together is like this is how we learn, right? It's very similar to the four levels of learning, which is like you start out in the dirt, you have no clarity, and you're kind of feeling stuck, and then you kind of have lessons through the roots, right, as you kind of grow and sprout, and then once you break through, you start to find some meaning, and then the fruits of that meaning come from the growth and how you show up. And as you build toward a more compassionate you, you're going to find that you are happier. You're going to find that you are able to achieve more. You're going to find that you are able to get more excited about life. And that's what this whole thing's about. So let's go back to that question before we move on to assertiveness. And then I'm going to take a 5-minute break because I need to stand up. And speaking of boundaries, one of mine is that I'm going to take care of myself while I'm doing this. So let's see. So Val, let's see. Shower on. Okay. Let's see. Am I getting any notifications? Do 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 do. Where was that question? Oh, there we go. Hashtag Valerie. All right. Can you share on how to apologize with confidence? Yes. First, do not deflect. So apologizing with confidence generally only needs to be done once. But with people pleasers, we tend to do it poorly. And hang on, I'm going to pull this up and see if I can find it. So let's see. It doesn't really matter. Oh, there we go. Make sure my Instagram's working. All right. So how do I apologize with confidence? First and foremost, you have to admit what you did. And the way you do that is you say, I know that when I did this thing, it hurt you. That's the start, right? Then you have to remove the behavior, which is to say, I will do everything in my power to never do that again. Please forgive me. Now, when you ask for forgiveness from someone, right? When you ask when you say you're sorry, that's all what you're doing is you're saying, I'm sorry. Most people pleasers say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and they'll apologize until they're blue in the fucking face. And they'll drive themselves crazy. So through that knowledge, it's probably important to recognize that that's not how you do it, right? To apologize with confidence is to say, I realize what I did. Here's how I know that made you feel. I will not be doing that again. Please forgive me. So, oh, you guys want to see the trees? Let's see. Can you go back to the last page real quick? The one with the Laura wanted to see the one with the fitness. All right, hang on. You guys are killing me. By the way, you guys know you can get all this stuff, right? Actually, you know what? I won't go back because all of this is in the course framework I've provided for you. So no, I'm not going to do that. What I want you to do is go to login .thepeopledispleaser.com, log into the coursework, and then you'll be able to get all that stuff from there. No, I don't have to go back and redo it because I don't want to. Take that, Laura Reed and Romana, whose last name would sound like I was murdering somebody because I don't know how to say that. So, what do you think about that, ladies? Oh, all right, that's enough of that. Moving on, strengthening and assertiveness skills. Oh shit, I was going to take a break. Whew. The ADD is strong with me today. All right, I'm going to go on. I'm going to keep doing it. So, strengthening assertiveness, right? Assertiveness versus passiveness versus aggression, right? These are important because assertiveness is a quality of being self-assured and confident without being aggressive, right? It involves expressing your thoughts and your feelings in a more direct and honest and respectful way. And assertive people stand up for their rights while respecting the rights of other people, right? That sounds like a great person, right? So they're direct in their communication style. They're direct in their communication style. Wait, where'd it go? Why is it doing this thing? Oh, there we go. It's because I'm doing it wrong. Perfect. All right. So they're direct in their communication. Assertive individuals tend to communicate their needs and desires very clearly and directly, and they don't really beat around the bush, right? So if you piss off somebody who's pretty assertive, they're going to say something like, hey, I didn't appreciate that, and don't do that again, right? It's not aggressive, it's not mean, it's just reality, right? They have a high level of respect for others. They respect other people's feelings, and that means that they actively listen and they consider other perspectives very deeply. That's what you find in assertiveness is a high level of confidence, right? Assertive people are confident in expressing themselves and not being overbearing. They have a very open body language. You notice how I sit. I'm a very assertive guy, but you notice that I sit with my shoulders open. I'm not like hunched over. Oh, I'm talking like this, right? Um, and we're always, the assertive ones are usually pretty relaxed, um, and tend to maintain eye contact, um, appropriately anyway. I used to be accused of being too intense many moons ago, but that doesn't happen much anymore. Right? So they have a high level of self-esteem. This is a challenging one. I think you can be assertive, um, and still not have great self-esteem, but you have to start to develop it. And we've talked about how we do that. Um, so, some examples of assertive behavior: saying no to unreasonable requests without feeling guilty, expressing appreciation or criticism in a meaningful way, asking for help when it's needed, big one, improving relationships with clear and honest communication, enhance self-esteem and self-confidence, and assertive people are generally a lot less stressed. So the benefits of being assertive are very high. Um, Now let's talk about passive people, right? Passiveness or passive behavior involves failing to express one's needs or desires or feelings. Passive individuals often avoid conflict. They put other people's needs before their own, and sometimes, if not always, they do it to their own detriment, right? They are people pleasers very often. They're conflict avoidant. They lack self-expression. Their apologetic behavior is usually consistent. So when it says apologetic behavior, what we're talking about is a submissive posture. They have terrible eye contact, and they generally have a low lack of self confidence or self worth. So their self image is not great, right? Some of the examples that you might see in a passive person, and if you ring true with any of these, probably a good idea to get in my boundary boot camp, which by the way is scrolling below, is agreeing to things that they don't want to avoid conflict, people pleaser tendency, suppressing their own needs and opinions, people pleasing tendency, failing to express dissatisfaction or discomfort, people pleasing tendency, right? And the drawbacks of this are huge, right? It's just you accumulate resentment over time. You end up with a poor self image that becomes unmanageable, and basically all your needs and desires get put aside, and you turn into resentful, bitter, and you start saying shit like, when is it my turn? And how come nobody ever gives to me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it'll make you just completely miserable. So moving on to aggressiveness. So aggressiveness involves expressing one's needs and desires in a way that violates the rights of others. Aggressive individuals often aim to dominate or control others through communication style. We see this in very often in sociopathy and psychopathy, but more consistently in the narcissistic personality disorder set. Um, Not everybody, again, narcissistic personality disorder is not as big a problem as people are making it. What's happening is we have a more narcissistic society, um, and it doesn't mean that everybody's a narcissist. It means that most people just don't know how to communicate anymore. And then if you're a people pleaser, you're going to experience people as more narcissistic because they're going to take what you give them, right? The characteristics of aggressive people, they tend to try and dominate and control other people. They blame and criticize. This is a huge one. It's like, no, nothing's ever their fault. Um, and especially with their own viewpoint, they tend to hold a threatening or menacing body language, right? So you may find these people to be very loud. They're very intense in their eye contact. Um, so they tend to have a low level of respect for other people. They don't respect the rights and feelings of others. They're historically overconfident. They may even appear arrogant, um, and cocky at times. I too can show up as arrogant and cocky, because I'm a wildly confident dude, and I'm pretty masculine, so I have a tendency to overdo that from time to time. It generally bites me in the ass, but well, not specifically in my dating life, but then it's usually pretty good. But Some of the investments I've made, some of the companies I've started, maybe were not the best plan. So, examples of aggressive behavior: interrupting others and not allowing them to speak, using insults or sarcasm. I see this a lot on my page. When I make somebody mad, they tend to call me names like, shithead or dumbass or whatever. They make demands. They don't ask for what they need, and they generally, the drawbacks are pretty gnarly, right? You're talking about damaged relationships, due to hostility and increased conflict, and very often they're isolated, as people kind of try to avoid interacting with them. At least I know I do. Um, let's see. All right. So why is assertiveness the preferred method? Well, it strikes a balance between passive and aggressive, right? It allows individuals to express themselves honestly, while respecting others, and it leads to healthy, more productive relationships. So this brings me to another point. If we talk about honesty, so if we have aggressive here, right? So aggression. This is one of the only through lines that I actually like. And then we have passivity, right? What we have right here in the middle is assertion, right? It's balanced. And where you find this balance is really important, because sometimes you have to be slightly more aggressive. Sometimes it needs to be more over here, right? Maybe this is the kind of line, or sometimes you need to be slightly more passive. I'll give you an example. Say you're a guy and you're dating a lady, and she's particularly hormonal. It might do you some good to not be quite as aggressive. So you back off that way. If you're a lady and you're dating a guy and he happens to be, you know, stressed out about work, maybe back off on the aggression and allow some passivity and to come into that conversation. Right? So this is all about balance. Um, so let me go back to my slides here. Where's the thing? There it is. So, um, when you think about honesty, that's what I was going to say. Also, when you think about honesty, going back to myself, when you think about honesty, so to do this well, honesty must have kindness to avoid cruelty. Okay, honesty must have kindness to avoid cruelty. Really important distinction, right? Because if you're honest and you're unkind, you will be cruel. If you are cruel, or if you are, um, yeah. So if you're honest without kindness, you are cruel. Um, if you are kind without being honest, you are manipulative. So um, remember this; it's really important. Honesty must have kindness to avoid cruelty. Otherwise, you kind of turn into a jerk. So going back to this, when you're expressing yourself honestly, when you're being assertive, it tends to lead to healthier and more productive relationships. It promotes mutual respect, right? Reduces stress, it enhances your personal and professional development. The sum of all parts gets better by learning how to be assertive, right? So to become more assertive, first and foremost, practice self-awareness. You have to learn to understand your own needs. It's vitally important, right? Using I statements is very important, right? Express your thoughts using statements like I feel or I need. The reason that you do that is because it takes the onus off of other people and allows you to do what you need to do. Learn to say no. Practice saying no to all unreasonable requests without feeling guilty. Practice saying no to all requests without feeling guilty. You can always change your mind. And you'll find very quickly that a no is a hell of a lot easier to come back from than a yes is, right? Try using body language and eye contact to your advantage. Um, I have, giant blue eyes, so people tend to like to look at mine, and I tend to like to look people in the eye as well. So when you look somebody in the eyes and you don't break contact, remember you don't have to like stare through their soul. You're not Freud. Just allow yourself to enjoy being in their presence, right? And then just stay calm and keep in touch with your emotions, right? You don't have to constantly be monitoring how you're feeling all the time. Nobody gives a shit. So you don't either. You don't want to be constantly in your feelings. You'll drive yourself nuts. So don't do that, right? The best thing you can do for yourself in that case is just remain calm, be who you are, and kind of stick with, what you know works. So all that said, now I'm going to take a break because we have hit 11:44 and I have now been teaching for 2 hours. So I'm going to go into my thing here and I'm just going to do intermission this time. So stand up, take a break. I'm gonna have a snack. Um, so I'll be about 10 minutes, plus or minus. There we go. Intermission. And this. What's up, party people? I wonder if you can hear me. Let's see. Check. Yep, looks like it. Cool. What's up, guys? Welcome back. Thanks, needed a sandwich. I feel a lot better. Got myself a Pellegrino. Drink a lot of Pellegrino these days. All right, Tony. Within the aggression passive distinction, where do you place language that feels manipulative and attention seeking, but also demanding and pressuring, i.e., we don't talk anymore, I know you, etc. That's kind of it's passive aggressive. So you're talking about kind of manipulative language. Rather than I would like to speak more, they accuse. There becomes an accusatory tone, as in I don't, you don't talk anymore, or we don't talk anymore. I know you better than you know yourself, etc. Or generally, they're usually accusatory, but they're usually passive accusation. So I would say that this is a pretty it's a pretty interesting distinction that you're asking me to make. It's not in here. Here, just all right. All right, within all that. Sorry about that. I had a thing. All right. So where do I place that language? I would say I place it kind of on the passive aggressive timeline. So aggression and passive aggression are still aggressive. Still aggression, no matter how you use it. Just the language is what makes it passive aggressive. Healthy people ask for what they want, and emotionally unstable people are generally either passive aggressive or active aggressive. I hope that makes sense. Oh, this is one of my favorites. I know you. I know you're busy, but it would be great to see you. I miss you. Okay. That is passive aggression. So that's passively saying, well, maybe you could tell me you want to come over, or just say, hey, do you want to come over? Like, it's the little things that'll drive you crazy, but yeah. Let's see. I am Mika. You asked on YouTube. Do you have a boundary that you express and that other is still pushing past them? Do I immediately move to the consequence or give them one or two talks around it? I would make the consequence pretty fun. If somebody's bumping up against your boundary 2 or 3 times, I mean, honestly, I would, after the first time, the conversation is the consequence, and then the consequence gets worse. I mean, when you say no to something or somebody else's actions, it's really simple what no means. Jordan Peterson talks about this at length, which is when you say no, you're saying if you keep doing that thing that I told you not to do, there's going to be a consequence that you're not going to like. That's pretty much it, right? So is the music on still? Damn it. Fixed it. It wasn't playing on my side. Is it better now? You guys are shazamming me. Oh God, I love you guys. Cat covered. Oh yeah. Sorry. Better? Yes? Okay. As I was saying, so we discussed a little bit about passive aggression. I'm sure you guys can hear me a little bit anyway. If somebody's bumping up against your boundaries more than once, the first conversation is the consequence. After that, the consequence is the consequence. Now, the consequence, again, needs to be equal to to the offense, right? So if somebody says, bumps up against it and it's kind of a light bump, it's not, something that's, toxic. You don't have to call them a selfish, ungrateful piece of shit, or you don't have to go completely fucking nuclear. You just, assert, hey, when you do that, it makes, it causes me to not want to be around you, and therefore I'm not going to do that today. Right. Is a great way of, asserting a boundary. Um, so I think it's, remember that your boundaries are internal guidelines for what you will accept and what you'll not accept, for what you will tolerate, not tolerate. So rather than trying to change somebody's behavior, what you choose to do is whether you will be around that behavior or not. So let's see, hide the intermission sticker here. There I am, Nick Pollard, the people displeaser. Um, I hope that's useful. And yes, it was probably our kitty Azula that was living in the thing. Um, all right. I thought, was that? There we go. So music is off now. We're good. All right. Well, I suppose it's only fair that Ramona get to laugh at me as as I make fun of her as well. Um, so remember that again, boundaries exist within you. They're not about other people. They're not about controlling other people's behavior. They're about controlling how you show up. Right. So if somebody else's behavior is particularly offensive within your boundary scope, then it's time for you to move on from the situation. Maybe not the person, right? So I'll give you going back to my example from earlier. I assertively say to my family, I don't discuss religion, politics, or money, um, and knowing that with my family. It doesn't mean that I won't talk to them about anything if they bring that up, right? It's more about like I just won't have that conversation, right? So they bring it up, and I choose to not engage. This also goes. This is also particularly true with some of my friends that I don't enjoy having political conversations with, so I just don't. One of them is just kind of a hothead, and I'm like, "Look, bro, like we're just gonna get pissed off at each other. I don't have time for that." So um, very often, that's how I'll show that I show up a little differently that way. All right, so we're in the final section. That's pretty exciting. Welcome back to Rebellion. This is the take control section. Probably the most important outside of the boundary section, because the boundaries are where you really start to learn how to do the thing that you do. Um, what we've got here is all right. So first and foremost, to take control of your life, you have to start interrupting patterns. So first and foremost, there is no such thing as failure. Um, as you change and grow, one of the core concepts that I've worked with for years now is that it is impossible for me to fail. Right? There's only data points teaching us more and about what we want and what we do not want. This was particularly true, and if you're somebody that's trying to get sober right now, I want you to listen to me on this. You have never relapsed. You have collected data points, and you're trying to figure out how to do this for yourself. It's really important. It's the same that goes true for boundaries. It's the same for people pleasing. Like you're not going to fall apart if you fail, right? You're just going to have to learn what you did and not do it again, right? It's okay to correct course. So I talk about course corrections a lot in the Boundary Boot Camp, and I'm going to put the link up for Boundary Boot Camp now, but for the next 40 minutes as I'm talking, or however long. Um, it's okay to fail. It's okay to get off course. Just notice early and often, and correct their steering. Right, you just pull the rudder and go the right way. Um, so create a good level of mindfulness and check in with yourself throughout the day as you start to kind of build your boundaries and start to figure out who you are. One of the things that I do, pretty much twice a day, is I ask myself, how am I showing up? Right? Is it aligned with how I want to show up? Right? Is it in alignment with my goals and who I want to be? These are three very powerful questions about how you how you work in life, right? And when we talk about course corrections, remember we talked about how there is no failure. Don't go with shoulds. The land of should is usually filled with shit. So don't go down into the should road. Um, I should be nicer to her. I should be nicer to myself, etc. These issues, when you start talking to yourself in that way, you end up creating a dialogue in your head that makes you feel not good enough, right? One other thing that I'll talk about in shoulds is don't ask yourself why questions. The minute you start asking why, you start down a road of judgment, because the words you're going to say are going to be the ones that you heard from your mother. Like, why did you break the vase? Why did you punch the cat? Like, what it's always why. And like most of the time, you don't know the answer to why you do things, but you can ask yourself, what was the consequence of doing that, or uh, what might I have been thinking when I did that, or what caused me to take this action. When you start thinking in terms of what you're allowed to, you can then pull out the data and really set it in lines, and you can say, okay, well, maybe this is something that moves me along the wrong roads, etc. Um, and you then can create a new course of action, right? That isn't about what you should be doing. Rather, it's about what you are doing, and where you are going. Um, you know, should is just a good way of kicking your own ass. And I've said for a million times, if kicking your own ass was going to work, it would have worked already, right? So the technique you learn in this little teaser class is a solid foundation for developing a kinder, more stable relationship with yourself, right? As a recovering people pleaser. However, true um, and lasting the change requires more of one's time and effort, right? It demands kind of a deeper, ongoing commitment. So consistently integrating these practices into your routine will help you put together more resilience and improve your mental health and foster a greater sense of well-being. So you want to commit to this path if you want your life to be, quite a lot more fulfilling. And to do that requires some work, right? So this course is designed around. I don't know why we still have this in here. That's an old. So this entire course, Rebellion, which by the way is concluding after day two here with you. This course was designed by me through the experiences that I've had over the last 5 to 7 years. And the thing that I would say that's been the most important part of my journey is learning to love myself as much as I loved other people. It was not learning to not love other people, and I want to stress that. It was learning to. It was so boundaries and self love and care and all this stuff gets conflated with the idea that you have to put yourself first, and I actually think that's horseshit. Um, so you have to learn to make yourself equal to the people that are in your life in terms of how you make your decisions. Your opinion should count first, always, and uh, secondarily, you should never strive to be better than anyone. Um, I certainly don't, and there's some things going on in my world that prove that I'm not better, and those things are consistent. Like, you know, I still have struggles. I still maintain, I have challenging relationships. I'm not perfect, and which means putting myself first is consequentially disastrous because the more you think about yourself, the more miserable you'll become. And um, so, with that said, if you really, really want to get to where you're trying to go, and you really want to change, the only way you're ever going to do that is through experiences. It doesn't matter how many books you read, it doesn't matter how you show up, it doesn't matter how well you know Tony Robbins, doesn't you could read every conceivable personal growth book ever conceived by man, and the results will still be the same. What's true is you will change how you show up by showing up differently. And the way you show up differently is by learning to express yourself in groups with other humans and to start moving down the same path, which is why I've made Boundary Boot Camp such an important part of how I do my practice and my coaching and everything that ever happens with me. So if I can counsel anyone still watching, if you still haven't signed up to join us at Boundary Boot Camp, now is the time to do that because you will accelerate, you will be happier, you will find a path, you will have a bill of rights. And through all of that, you're going to find a much more passionate and vibrant way of living. And you're going to have boundaries for the holidays which is a hell of a cool thing. So, um, without further ado, now it's time for Q&A. So, hit me with it. What you got? I wonder if I can bring anybody in. Hang on. I'm curious. Comments. Oh, interesting. I can. All right. Who has a question for me? Let's see. Jeff, I don't know what you said, oh, wow, to, but I'm glad you did. Thanks, buddy. Questions, thoughts, oversights, perhaps? Boundaries for the holiday makes a great gift. Everybody's going to love it. Yeah, that sounds exciting. Thinking about doing more lives. Do you want to touch on holiday boundaries with family? Um, sure. Um, I'd love for some people to ask specifically about holiday boundaries. Um, if there's anybody that's actually watching on StreamYard and you're open to it, I'd love to bring you on, you can ask me a question right here. Oh, Mark, you got to go to myboundarybootcamp.com, and that'll put you into. So if you want to get signed up, the thing scrolling here at the bottom says myboundarybootcamp.com. That's where you want to go. That's the link to use. Again, myboundarybootcamp.com. That'll put you onto the sales page. You'll be able to look at all the information. A few things on there are going to be changing. I have put some new cool things into the bootcamp that I'm really excited about. We do have two options. We have a very small group option, and um, we have the larger group option. So both are very cool. I'm excited about both. Ramona, my 5 secrets for getting over anxiety to make a workshop like this. Um, well, I'm awfully pretty. That helps. Um, so that was like one. That I'm awfully pretty. I'm kidding. I mean, I'm still pretty, but that's not what it was. So I don't know if there's five. Um, so I think the first thing is I've taught Boundary Bootcamp now 5 times. So when I was able to put this together the second time, just kind of felt like the way I do it. Um, and the way I do Boundary Bootcamp is the way I do this. Actually Boundary Bootcamp is slightly more interactive, so I do quite a lot more talking in that. But um, I think the best thing you can do is just to do. I don't practice because it makes me nervous. So that's one thing. Is like I build the course, and then I just kind of let myself do it and do it as best I can, and then so there's that. The first thing I would tell you though is get ready is to start making real content. If you really want to start, taking control of some things, um, the best thing you can do is just to start creating. And as you do that, you'll start to find that you become more confident in this endeavor as well. So you already have the stuff you want to say, Ramona. It's just, and I've met you, and you're wonderful, and you're going to have a great practice when you're ready to do it. You just have to do it. So hope that helps, buddy. Will I be talking? Great question, Tony. I will be talking about shame in the Boundary Boot Camp, and how it affects self-esteem. Awesome, and welcome to Boundary Boot Camp, Tony. That's so cool. Congratulations on getting in. So I will be talking quite a lot about shame in the Boundary Boot Camp, because I think shame and especially in the masculine frame can be really really damaging. I mean, of course, it's very damaging in the feminine as well, but I think it was one of the things I really had to overcome in my life was this idea that I wasn't enough, and worse than that, that I was bad. Right. So if you're dealing with shame, yes, Boundary Boot Camp is a good place to start because we will be doing quite a lot of work with that. And I do actively coach in that, by the way. So I'm starting a new job and I don't want to burn out. Emma, love it. So, first and foremost, Emma, the thing I would tell you about burnout is that usually comes after you've given too much. So, what I would suggest is to really tailor how you show up initially, right? So, you want to, um, here, yeah, I can actually invite you in to see that. Do you want? All right, I'm gonna send you an invite, Emma, because I'm curious. See if you can we can let you in here. Wait, am I not allowed to do that anymore? There we go. Hang on. I'm going to invite you to the studio. If you want to come in, you can ask me your questions live. I will probably just kind of bring people in as we go. Um, but um, Back to your question. So, first things first is you need to be prepared to take it slower. So, when you get into a new job, you probably are like me and you have a tendency to overdo it. So, maybe don't do that this time and allow yourself to have your moment, right? But also, it's worth saying that um, burnout will happen because you give too much. So make sure you leave on time. Make sure you're standing up for your value systems. Make sure you're spending enough time on you. Make sure you take your breaks. Like one of the things I've always been bad at is taking breaks. So take a lunch break, but do the things that you know you need to do to not burn out, which is generally speaking just taking care of yourself. So hope that helps. Um, let's see. Also, me, I don't like to practice. Look at you. Romano loves to talk to me. I dig it. All right. Can you give me a few examples of a proper way to say boundary versus the incorrect way? Because, for example, will you please no longer talk to me that way, or don't talk to me like that? This is great. Those are terrible ways to express a boundary. So, um, um, Tanika, that's here we go. I am Tanika. I am Nick Tanika. Um, so here's a great. This is actually both of those are really terrible ways to express a boundary. So you asked, can I give you examples of a proper way? Um, the best way to express a boundary sounds like this. I am uncomfortable with the way you are speaking to me, and I'm going to end the conversation. Right? Um, will you please no longer talk to me like that is a suggestion, or don't talk to me like that is a command. A boundary says, I will not engage with you if you talk to me like that. Right? Talking to me like that is counterproductive to our having communication. I will be ending the conversation now. Or talking to me like that will cause me to end the conversation. Would you like to change the subject or your tone? Right? So you give people an option, like talking to me like that will make me change the subject or exit the conversation. That's how I handle my um, you know political ones. Like talking about politics will make me leave the situation. Do you want to change the subject? I don't. Cool. See you later. Right? Will you please no longer talk to me like that? Let me explain it another way. When you talk to me like that, it causes me to want to end the conversation. Do you want to slow down or do we need to take a break? Right? So that's how you handle that. Tanika, by the way, your comment did show up. Um, so I think it's just a little slow. Let's see. Let's see. Which question? All right. We got you. All right. So we got Andrea. Talk more about burnout. Sure. What do you want to know? Here, let's do. Let's see. I don't know. I mean, you can ask me a question. I can tell you that burnout's real, and I've been through it quite a lot. And the best way to avoid it is to prioritize your care of self. Burnout, um, burnout for me almost universally showed up when I wasn't working out. Interestingly enough, um, I actually don't believe in burnout in many ways. I think it's a great word for saying that I've lost my mojo. Um, I don't think people burn out. I think they stop doing the work. They stop growing. They stop fighting bigger demons. And that's what, when things aren't interesting, you burn out. That's how it works. I've heard you can't put boundaries on others, only on yourself. And that you're helping me make that sense. But because I always found it confusing. I'm really glad, Mark. I will say that boundaries are a really challenging subject if you don't know what you're talking about. And I think there's a lot of literature out there that's kind of misguided. And then I also think pop psychology has just done a shit job of kind of asserting what boundaries really are, and all too often they're not anywhere close to what people think. Like I hear it all the time. Like I put a boundary on my mom. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? How'd you put a boundary on anybody but you? You can't put a boundary on other people. That's not how boundaries function. It's not, functionally in reality. That's not how it goes. So you don't get to do that. So I think you're right to be confused because, frankly, that's that's kind of horseshit. Like you can't put a boundary on anyone else. You decide what you'll accept, what you will not accept, what you'll tolerate, what you'll not tolerate. Right. And once you figure that out, then you decide what situations you're willing to be in and which you're not. And that's pretty much it. I think what I meant for burnout and work. Okay. Yeah. So Emma, so Emma, what you just described was what I just told you not to do. Right. So the answer is in your question. Um, and which is funny to me because here you are, right? Um, you asked how to avoid burnout. Well, don't do that. Right? Stop taking on more. Do your job, right? Stop trying to save everyone else. Stop trying to make everybody happy. Do your job the best you can, do it to the very best of your ability, and then get better at it every day. And then let them give you more responsibility when you've earned it, right? Don't take on others' responsibilities. They didn't pay you for that. They're paying you to do your job. So do your job first. Then take on other stuff if you want to. But remember, if you want to, right? And one of the things you'll learn in Boundary Boot Camp, should you decide to join it, is how to say no, and a lot, like say no a lot. So there's that. Yes, please show effective disengagement. I'm not sure what you mean. I don't see a question around that. Um, Val, maybe you can put the question in here. I can't see it. Putting boundaries on others is trying to control others. Putting boundaries on others when they sound like a so it's not putting boundaries on others. It's kind of like saying I set my boundaries with my mom or I set my boundaries with my dad. No, you didn't. You tried to put a rule on them. You decide how what you will tolerate, right? So that's the deal. Um, Nikki McKinsey, I know that name. Um, I stopped giving 100% when I realized my 60% is the same as Chad's 100%, and we make the same amount of money. Sure. Yeah, that's probably true. Um, it's in some companies, if you're the Nikki McKinsey I think I'm talking to, then I know what you do, and that doesn't surprise me given the size of the organizations in which you work. But the it, do your job and do it the best you can do it, and then be done with it. It's just kind of how I've lived my life, and that's what I keep doing, right? Um, so Teresa, I have three siblings that I avoid because they are alcoholic, critical, insulting know-it-alls. Sure, that makes sense. There's not a lot worse than that. Um, I used to be I've said this a lot. If you take alcohol and pour it on top of people pleasing, you'll get a narcissist. Um, because it lowers our walls and it makes us really shitty. You pull alcohol out of the situation, and very often people become kind and sweet, and they go back to kind of the default. um, so, yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. If you avoid them, that makes sense. It sucks, I'm sure. Um, how do you know when you're on the path to burnout? um, you know, um, because you complain. You'll start complaining, like I'm doing too much, I work too much, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're not listening to yourself. You know the answer to that, or you wouldn't be asking. You know how to not burn out. You already said it, right? So the challenge here is like it's not how do I know when I'm on the path. It's are you willing to do something about it? Right? You know when you're on the path. You're trying to intellectualize a change, and that's not working, right? So what you're doing is like, well, if I don't overgive, or if I don't do too much, then maybe they won't like me, and I won't have a job. No, that's true. So what you're really doing is trying to intellectualize something and make it more challenging than it really is. So my suggestion to you, my dear Andrea, would be to pay attention to your complaining. Should I just stay engaged or visit? I mean, it's up to you. If they're intolerable, narcissistic, critical shitheads, I wouldn't go visit them all. I haven't seen my one of my sisters in shit, um, 15 years. I'll probably never see her again. Well, don't do that. We all need our beauty sleep, Ramona. So do you need to constantly engage with your family? No. Blood is thicker than water, but it's not thicker than bullshit. And I have a very low tolerance for bullshit. Can you speak to being a people pleaser, empath, highly sensitive person, savior complex, truth? Says Christ. Huh? Tanika, got a bad girl. Let's see. People pleaser, empath, highly sensitive person, savior complex, truth seeker, codependent, and how taking these roles as a badge of honor does more harm than good. Um, I mean, I can speak to it. It's the same thing as embodying your trauma, right? It's like the problems with you exist because you choose to hang on to them, right? So it's like I saw this when I was an alcoholic. It's when you drink like that, alcoholics do this thing where they're like, "I'm an alcoholic," like they know. And I don't think anybody really loves being a people pleaser. I don't think that they're like wearing that as a badge of honor. But where I do think I see it is in the empath and the HSP, um, the and some of those other ones, right? So when people call themselves an empath, what they're actually saying um, is, "I'm hyper vigilant to everything around me. I can read subtle cues and facial expressions, and I'm terrified of everything." So what we're talking about is the glorification of a trauma response. It's it also empath also defines being emotionally unstable. Um, so because you take on the emotions of other people, right? So I would say that taking on any of these roles as a badge of honor, is akin to destroying your self-image, and it makes you into somebody that you don't want to be, um, because your locus of control becomes externalized, and therefore um, you truly can't be happy in an environment like that, doing those types of behaviors. So hope that makes sense. Um, Anybody else? Any more questions? Let's see. Nothing? Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming to my presentation of Rebellion, How to Stop People Pleasing. I will be doing more of these in the coming months as I kind of tune this one up and change a few things about it the next run and make it, potentially more engaging. I'd like to invite more people into the studio to actually to talk, and I'd like to be able to share a bit more about kind of the inner workings of what it means to be confident. In the meantime, I am exhausted. So you guys are amazing, and I'm very proud of this course, and I'm very proud of everybody that showed up. And I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll join me in Boundary Boot Camp, which starts December 7th. For the first time ever, I'm doing it on Saturdays rather than a weekday, to give more people an opportunity to get in. And I really hope that it's successful, and I hope we do really well, and I hope we have a lot of fun. We always do, and I love you guys, and you're great. So thanks for coming out, and I hope this helped.